Right, so we're back again. Today I'm thinking about either doing the UI with raycasting or doing the actual launcher for the game. So which one do I want to do first? But I've just realised we've got to do the camera as well, because the camera still doesn't function properly. So let's start with the camera first. Let's find where the camera was set up, which could be on layers. So camera equals null. Vector position, right. I didn't design this very well, so let's start with creating a var camera equals function, and if we save this we can, where do I want to put it? It's in the core, so it'll be core.camera.js. This camera needs a position equals new vector, and this needs a rotation value, needs charging, needs a rotation value equals 0, and we're going to do this dot set position, and we can do some fancy maths in here. When this runs, we also want it to do the set position first. Yeah. What this needs to do is it needs to take in a vector. That needs to be a function first. Because function. Then it needs to take in a pos position vector. And I want to do something slightly abstract with it, which is to maybe it's cool. So we need to get the in-game 640, so it would be the core.resx, and we divide it by 2. And what this is going to do is center the camera's position to the actual, so the center of the camera when it looks in game will be at 0, 0, instead of having it top left of the camera being 0, 0. We want to move it to the center. So then we need to do this from whatever the position is. Or pos, and position needs to .x equals this, and position.y equals this. We can do set position equals new vector. Yeah, that should be alright anyway. And rotation can be just rotation. So now the fancy stuff we need to do on this is, so if camera equals null, we don't want camera to be vector. Yeah, so it looks like we've already taken this into account here. So we need to make it a new camera. And we also need to add the camera into this system here, so it needs to be present before the layer, which will be here, and fortunately when doing this before we've done all the render systems, we can actually set this into account here. And does the actor have a reference to the layer? It does. Actually, no, we don't. We need to make sure on the actual layer itself is when it does the on run, before it does all this run draw, we do the all this stuff. Let's do all of this before. I'm just doing this so hopefully I won't make a mistake. So we don't have an actor and we don't need this layer, we just need this context. Rotates, so we take the rotation value of camera dot rotation, which, did I call it rotation? Yes. Little layers. Rotation map to radians, which should still work, and now we need to take into the account this camera's position. So I believe we need to minus it first, and then later on we add it back on. Or no, we would move it positive first and then we'd move it minus later. And we'll soon see anyway. Then we do all this, then we would need to do the reverse. And we would need to flip the order of these around, so this would come after rotation because we did the rotation last. Now if we run this, which I need to go and run the engine. For some reason it likes to play it in small. So right now we have nothing. Either what I've just done is wrong or we've got a problem, which is layer 24, which is here. Context. Stop context. Okay, so it might not be this. Position. So camera must not exist at this point. Okay, so this was again the location vector. And we can just make on start, hopefully this is still being called, or hopefully I called it in the first place. Camera should now exist. Position is not defined on camera 8. Position, right, because it's the stop position. Pauses, yep, it should now work. Okay. It's also Y. And let's just check core is done before and Y is done now. Is it calling this at all? Or is it not doing any of this? I guess we can see. Layer 2. camera. Rotation vector, position is a vector, and them both are a number. That's not good. And that's because I need to use pos.y and pos.x. So hopefully now it should center it, or it will be off the screen completely. And as I thought it was going to be off the screen completely. And that just means these values are the wrong way around. We need to subtract it at the start and then we add it on at the end. And now they should be in the center, yes. Which means if I did the position, set position, new vector, we'll do x dot 80. I'm not sure this is good code. No, it broke it completely. Let's try vec equals new vector. I could do an anonymous class, but it's just easier to read. And then you put vec in there. As x becomes bigger, it should move to, everything should move to the left because the camera is moving to the right. And that should now also mean that if I do camera dot rotation equals 40, and we get 40. So just check that if I do 5 it is moving in the right direction, which it appears to be. Yeah. So the camera's done, and that's quite simple. Last time I did all these actors, I'm unsure if I'm going to keep this, but I'm not going to decide it right now. We have this dot properties, but I want to also do this dot user interface. And today we're going to do the UI then. So all this does the actors and this does the properties. Now when it comes to the UI, I want it to do all the drawing information with the drawing. Okay. User interface, and we will do user interface here, and we'll use draw GUI on that as well. This time I'm going to do it slightly differently, which means I'm going to need something other than the properties. And I'm going to call this user interface. I'm going to keep it one word just for convenience, and I want to get rid of all this. User interface, and user interface is what UI is known, also referred to as UI. User interface, user interface, user interface, and some of this stuff needs to go. Enable can stay, setup needs to stay as well. trying to think. So actor is set up, yeah, is enabled, needs to stay. Property name, I think property name should have stayed. It doesn't matter, that's all, that's going to stay anyway. Pre-setup, late setup. I'm just going to put the setup back in. Function, and that will do. And we'll keep draw GUI, which means I need to add in the setup. Needs to come into here. Setup. And this is set up, and for all of these is so now this should set up at the start of any turn, and this should also draw at the end of every turn. And the user interface is ready to use as the extending class. Now we want to start with a basic something like a button or something of that type. Var button equals function, and then the button needs to extend from user interface underscore extend, and we're just going to put button in there. We can just keep the button in here. I should have called it button.js, not just button. Which now means I need to go and delete this. And we have this system here, which needs to go draw GUI, just so we can see what it's actually doing. And let's just have a little gander at this. So as you can see, everything's being done on the actual graphics. Let's just copy this. Obviously we need to change some things up. The size, for instance, no longer applies. Position rotation will also need to stay as in effect. And we might want to change this to size X and size Y. Or we could do size dot equals new vector, and we will put in the everything on this side will be an X and everything on that side will be a Y. And that should be done now, so everything with a size on has these values. And I do want to set, did I actually, Okay, I did put, so you could put it in like this. Put 50 and 20. So it should be 50 wide by 20 up. And we would also need to add this to this system. Did I add user interface? No. Unfortunately, I can just put it below. It's not in properties, it's in user interface. And we can put button, so now all of this should be pulling in. We just need to have a test system, so we need to put a button. I'll create a new button with a prop. We're not having a second property because it'll just be one property. We need the actor, which is going to be, I can add a new actor, doesn't really matter. What should call it, actor 2. Actor 2, add property. So I'm going to add the button property. We don't need this one because there's only one. And it's not a property that we're going to add in, we need to add in a UI element. Core.scene.add actor. And we're adding it to actor 2. Scene 2, and I'm going to put it on scene 3, layer 3. But this is on the actor, and this is not what we're going to be using. Where is it? Find property, add property, add UI, and we will just go to the core and just add in add UI here. Properties, user interface. And call it GUI is not a function. Button 7. Let's have a look why this is not working. So it's saying there's some problem in here. I think it said draw GUI is defined in here, which it is. Let's just check. It's user interface extends button. Strange. Free this properly. Put 7. Okay. Right, it's because we haven't put a function calling. We haven't created it as a function, we just created it as a, well, I guess object, which it doesn't like. Reading that is active 60. This setup is not part of user interface, which it is. Properties are equal to false. Because we was looking at all the properties and we was using an indexer that was related to the property, not the user interface. So that should fix that, which I believe will also cause a problem in the Draw GUI, if I can remember where I put that. I should have this one GUI. Oh no, I did already set it up to be this way. Setup is not a function. Okay. User interface, setup is a function. Setup equals setup. Oh, it's lowercase u, which doesn't really matter. So setup is not a function, which it won't be because some silly things that I'm doing right now. So hopefully this should work now. Yep, so we have this button and it does nothing when we click it, so we need to add in something else, and what we need to add in is an event manager. Engine event manager. And we're going to create it as, I guess, just a global object. And in this manager we're going to have to do a new system to handle the UIs, which is going to look like UI events, and we're going to create an array to handle UI events, and we need to now make a function to add UI events. So add UI events plus function, and it's not equals function, it's colon function. And we're going to give it a event name, and we're going to give it a callback. And now what we've got to do is add to this events. If the event name has not been found, we need to add to the events, UI events. So we need to go for UI events. I really should look into it. The fine system for JS, because this is going to be a pain. But I'm not going to do it. Events.length, and I'm just going to loop through it. So as long as I is less than the length, and if UI events dot I dot event name equals event name, then we're going to push it to the callback. I'm going to push the callback to the event slot, so which means I should make it known what this is going to include. So I'm just going to call it EN for event name, and this will just be something like name but the callback would be CA, and we'll have an array of funcs like so. So now all I've got to do is change this event name to en. So we're looking for this, and I'll put this in here so we know it's what it looks like. So if en equals this, then this dot call back dot push the function callback. So it will be adding to the list, and then we would return, because we've done it, we've added the event to it. But if we haven't added the event to it, it probably means that the event name has not been found, so we need to go UI events dot push, and now we've got to make this essentially. And let's just use it as it is. So event name dot event name, callback will just be a callback, and we're done. So that's just going to get pushed to the UI events. Now we can go invoke event equals function. Then we want to do event name and now we've got an event name. We want to loop through all of these events that we stored in it. So if the name is correct, then we want to loop through all the callbacks inside it. Functions. We'll have to denote it as J. And it won't be this, it will be I dot CA dot length. J, and then we essentially want to invoke it, and that should now, I think you can also put call at the start of it and then put it in brackets, and it should call the function because it's saved as a function. That would also work in theory. So let's just call it event manager. engine.eventmanager.js. I'm going to copy the name just because I want to go all the way back down to index, and we want to add this in pretty early on. Eventmanager.js. And hopefully there's no errors in here. Which there is, invalid shorthand in the property line 17. Equal sign colon, because it's an object, it's just like a global static object. No problem here, so engine event manager, and we'll see it's nothing. So if we added a add UI event call it click or something like this, and we'd do function dot I'm just going to make it temporary in here because it's going to be a pain. No, so add, grab it. We're just going to create a event called click, and we're going to add a function to it which will now be just a simple alert which says been clicked. And something like that should be pretty simple. And just to test it works, UI events is not defined. That was on 7. It's going to be one of these things where I need to, oh, wrong way around, every time I use one of them. Because it looks like it's going to be just a pain. Right, let's try this first, and we can see it's been set up properly. And now if we try launching it, now if we have a look at what's inside it, you see that the UI has one event now, has one event, and it is click, and it does a function which it doesn't say what the function is. So let's just try and invoke event, and the event is just going to be click and being clicked. So what this means is we can delegate information to go outside of the actual, for instance, this button. So if we click this button, we want to make sure something gets evoked, but where does it get evoked? Well, now it's going to be stored in the event engine event manager. This one specifically needs to be on start callbacks or events, and we can give it an empty event names. So that does part of what we needed to do. We just need to now make sure when it does the input from here, because we have got a, did we get button down? What if I need to look that up, because I need to add it to this as well. The button down and button up. Because if I remember right, it's not as simple as just doing key down. You've got to use 0 and 1s and 2s, and I can't remember if 1 is the left or middle. And I don't really want to do the whole thing where I design something a little I'll just quickly look it up. Right, so it seems to be everybody uses jQuery these days, so, and I'm not going to use jQuery, so I'm just going to have to work it out as I go along. On mouse button down equals function, and we're going to give it an event, and we've got to put on a mouse button up, and it's also going to take an event, and I want to do console.log the event, and we're just going to add the events down here. So window on mouse down equals this, and window dot on mouse up equals on mouse button up, and then hopefully, if this all works, I should just be able to use the framework of the other mouses, the other buttons, and it should be able to detect it. Right, so what's this going to tell me? Mouse button 0, buttons 1. Okay, so it can track multiple buttons, it looks like. So if I just do dot button 1, dot button, if event dot button equals 0, it should mean that I can do something like this. So I'm just going to take something like this, and it's not doing anything to do with the stream. So we've got the event dot key. So it's just got to be held. So we're going to put it as we'll check. We'll do a simple button thing. Button num equals event dot button, and then we can put mouse button plus button num, and we can also use this for this as well. I'm just wondering if that's going to have some influence on I guess not now. And now on key up we need to do the same, pretty much the same thing. I'm just going to take the event and we're just going to throw in this, so push on event key up, if it includes this event name, and we'll just get rid of it, it's already been seen. And did I save it before I did that? Yes. And we can just get rid of this space just for continuity. And token is not expected on 39 of input. Looks like I've taken one extra. We're only taking it there, which is fine. That should be fixed. I don't know if the token equals input 40. Ah, I've put it everywhere. There we go. So now when I do this, I need to now make a system in here. So the engine event manager needs to be able to invoke the scene to cascade down to find the first button appearance from the top layers to the lower layers. That should be easy enough, so I need to put a comma first to denote there is another element after it. And in this element I need to call this mouse down event, and we're going to give it a function, and we just need to go to call dot scene. I'm pretty sure it is called scene. Okay, it's lowercase. And we're going to trigger a new function which is mouse down UI. And all that's going to do is, why did I not copy that before I move scene? We're going to do a detection system to see whether or not we'll do it in the actual button system, and we're going to just cascade it down into the layers. So y++, and we actually want to do it the opposite way around, so we are going to set this to layers -1, and we're going to do this while it is greater than or equal to 0. And minus minus. Seems fair to me, so then all we're going to do this dot layers dot I, and then we need to do something in the layers, which will be dot mouse down I'll just call it the same thing. Mouse down UI equals function, and if we just set this up so it goes straight to there first, we don't need to worry about the scene because they will be all handled here. And now almost at the end of this chain. And I am tempted to do it slightly different to just a normal function. Which we'll consider in a second. Now we need to go through all the actors, but now we need to go through the actors backwards. Like we did the same way we did the layers. We did the layers, we cascaded down the layers backwards. We need to do this backwards too. And the reason we're doing it backwards is just so the later the actor is added to the scene, the higher the priority is on the click, rather than the first. Because if you think about how it draws the last thing as on top, So if you're going to click something that you're seeing, it's going to be drawn on top, not on the bottom. And set an actors to, so we're just going to do dot mouse down UI, and finally on mouse down UI we need to go through all the user interfaces, which again we need to go backwards through them. We do -1 because to start off with, because the element itself is, if you take the last one, it will be just one outside of the array length. So this needs to be -, and now we're going to do some fancy work here, which means we need to do some extra systems in here. So I'm going to have a flag system, flag in range equals function, and this function needs to return something, so it needs to return a false by default. And so in range is going to be the first check, because the first check is going to be very quick, and then the second check is going to be almost as quick. Not almost as quick, it's going to take a lot longer than the first check. So the first check is going to be quick, so we can just say we're not going to check this element now, we're going to move on to the next one. Whereas the second one is going to be, so if you've got a circle, if it's not in the circle, then it's just going to continue going through it. It makes sense for the CPU, not so much for people. Unclick. So this one can just return a, oh yeah, still return false. And the actor itself needs to go through the flag first, so flag range. If flag range, then we are going to continue. Otherwise, turn false. We haven't done anything with this yet, so don't worry too much if you don't understand what it's doing. Flag is in range. Now we've got flag on. Flag on click. Okay, so activated equals this, and if it's not activated, it's false, then, or if activated equals true, then we can return true. and we're just going to be mouse down is true. Then if this is true, so activated equals false, activated equals this, activated equals true, I'm going to return true. If not, I'm just going to return false after the fact. They've checked everything. And I just want to check that is what I did there, yes. And it went up to the actors, went up to the layers, went up to the scene. So, and this is the last one that we need to put the false. Activated equals layers. If activated equals true, then do we yeah, I guess we can just return it. And we don't have to worry about the last one because this is the last part where it's invoked. So now we need to get this button to work, which means the event names. Okay, so I was going to do it I think I was going to do it a different way. Okay, no, we'll just do it this way. The problem is I keep seeing different ways of doing every single little thing. And I get confused on which one, because I've thought about it in different ways. I get confused on which way I'm actually building it. So sometimes I'll start building it one way and then I'll build it another way. And now I think I've got this right. So now I need to have a look to see whether or not so all this context has got to be taken into account now. So which also means the camera has to be taken into account, which is on the scene level, which means there's got to be a lot of maths in here. But for now, if we given that the camera is at 0, 0, we can just use what's in here, as long as we don't rotate the actor, we should be able to find it pretty easily. So when looking at the size, so if it's in range of size, it's take position plus the position minus the size. Size.x is less than input dot get mouse position. I think that's what I called it. Get mouse position, and I believe this returns a vector. Yes. So who knows whether I'm going to pass it. I might end up passing the mouse up into here instead of having to call it every single time we do any checks. So this mouse would be mouse.x is less, if mouse.x is greater than or equal to this, if is less than or equal to this, and then I need to do the same for the y. And I want to do every single one of these. Yeah, just the last one. Turn true, and let's continue all the way down and return false. And I'm just going to return true here because it's always going to do this check before it's going to do this on-click check, so it is equal to true. Now hopefully we can just go through and do all these events. So engine dot event, not dot, just event manager dot invoke event name. So this is what I want to do after. This is what I want to do in the loop, not outside the loop. Let r equals 0, I is less than this dot event names length I++, and we just want to pass this into here, and it should do all the events. And just because I want to test this out, I'm going to just put in, I think it's just setup equals function. So when this button gets set up, I want it to do this, just for now. So it should add all this to the event manager, and I'm just going to, for now, put in click, which should show us how it works if there is no mistakes, which I guarantee there will be. User interface 9. There's at least 2 mistakes so far. The next mistakes. Alright, being clicked, being clicked, being clicked, being clicked, being clicked. Something's wrong. Because it should not be invoking it just yet. Being clicked is being invoked. Why is it being invoked? And it's not going to open that. Oh, it is. It's going to be very slow. User interface. Did I even call it? Oh, I guarantee I did. Or I didn't, or I've written somewhere where it was not supposed to be, which should be. Let's have a just search for it. Okay, it does not exist in here. Where is it being invoked? Which there is a way I can do it, which is just to change this from being clicked alert, which might just come back with anonymous now. So and this is just going to go into an endless loop now. So I should just throw an error and see where it goes. Probably threw an error before it even got a chance to activate. Okay, for some reason I put the evoke, which I don't need to do. And if I click somewhere, will it activate? Did I put this under a flag whether or not it does activate? Which would explain why it's going into an endless loop. So I didn't do. Right, yeah, because this never got flagged as true. What am I doing? It's very bizarre what coding I just did, or what I've done today. The setup needs to be equal to true now. So for some reason I've put that on the outside. So now that should now needs to equal to true. It's bizarre how I wrote that. So so the event has been added and it's not being fired. And now we need to work our way through this layers just to see where everything is. So that'll be on the first actor. User interface button. And this is what's on the button, which means the click event has been activated, and let's just do flag on click. Invoke is not a function. Evoke event is a function there. That should work. Although that was not the problem that arose. Okay, this is going to be a nightmare. So failed layer. So I'm just going to put some debug points throughout the code, and I'm going to check whether it has reached these points. Or it could just be that I haven't actually done event manager and went to the input section and got input dot mouse down. The mouse down event, which needs to be here. Now let's try it. Failed, 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 which means something's going wrong. If I just quickly check that I did put all these in right. Minus size, minus plus the size. So x plus, that's the middle position, minus the x position of the size should then be less than, and this should be greater than, less than, and greater than, which means everything I've put in was wrong. And I'm trying to taking the camera outside of the equation. Still failing, so there must be somewhere else it's failing. So let's go into the actor and put actor. We might as well do all of them while I'm here. I'll just do those two. Fails the layer, which means it fails. Well, that could be one of the reasons, because I didn't put I. Right. Is dot actors dot I dot mouse down. Actors should become invoked. I dot flag is in range. Flags in range. Wise it will be returning false, which should console log the failed actor, but it hasn't, so it's not, for some reason it's not going into this mouse down. So the only two ways of leaving this function is before this return and before this return. If we do it on the first one, is it going to, and it does it 5 each time, so it's going through each of the layers. so that if that's true, then it returns nothing. Let's write down. Just console.log the actor is checking, just to make sure there is there's only 3 actors in the scene, and it's not finding any of them. It could be because it's not dot length. Yeah, let's try that. Yep, fail. Success. Right, so it was just that dot, putting that length here was the only problem. So now if we click the button, because we haven't taken into account the camera yet, it is just going to be up here where it gets invoked. So we have UI, but it's not great, but it's getting there. So can we when we set up an actor, can we pass it a camera reference? Or actually, we only even need to put the camera reference. As long as there is a layer reference, there should be a camera. So the camera equal actor dot layer dot camera, or the layer is not seen. Has the scene got a camera? No. Okay, that will work. So there is a camera there, and we now have the camera referenced. So then we need to take the camera into account, and we need to minus the camera. .y. And now it should just activate when we click this box. Or not. Can't be plus. Oh, can be plus, because it's a negative value. User interface that actor is undefined, so this actor is not defined. Interesting. So in user interface doesn't really matter because we need to define it in here. So when it adds UI, we need to do property. Okay, to push an actor to it. Or is it because I'm looking for an actor on a list where there is no... Right, so it does have an actor. And does that have a layer? Yeah, and then does this have a camera? Yes, it does. And the camera has a position value, and it is not just a position value, so it is a position that I needed. And again, I think my first intuition around this camera needs to be subtracted was correct. And now if I don't click inside, if I don't click the button itself, it doesn't put this number here, register. So now we have a way of adding function and adding delegated functions to UI, to the user interface essentially. And this box shouldn't be drawn, but then again I'm not drawing essentially drawing a white box, because I think you need to do fill rect. Okay, so let's go one step further than I did with the original draw red square. Is we're going to add a colour value to it. Fill colour, and this is going to be just a string of, let's put it as a red box, so it's a hex value. This is an 8-bit, and you can have 16-bit, which is 6 digits. And we'll do the outline colour. Let's change it to colour outline, seeing as we've got two colour values. Colour fill, and the outline will just be black. Now I believe you need to do a begin path. Then we do the fill. Context fill style equals and I just shove the colour in there, so colour fill. And I think it's line style. Colour outline, we'll just leave it as colour. And we've got the stroke, well, it could be stroke style. And then I think we need to do fill rect, and we need to put the lowest points in and the highest points. So that would be the minus size.x, minus y, and positive x and positive y. Now it's likely this is going to be an error. Right, colour fill is not defined. It's going to be this dot cut. Fill style is not a function. Might be more of a property that you just set it to okay, so we have something that seems to be slightly off. Now why it's only drawn half of it is a little confusing. Should probably test that the stroke style is correct as well. Yeah, so we've got the outline and we've got the box colour. And for some reason one corner to the previous corner. Okay, so this is width of, that's why. It's not drawing it to the coordinates, it's drawing it to, this is how wide it's going to be and this is how tall it's going to be. But I was taking it as drawing it from this coordinate to this coordinate. That's why it's double. Because size is half. I think it still works. And this is broken now because we've got the camera. So if I put it in naught, it should be drawing it in the centre. But now we have a button and we have little squares that move around. We might as well just add this code to the render square, seeing as pretty much the same. And we'll just obviously the might miss the fill rect, or it's because the size is, because it's a square, it doesn't have the two values, it only has the single value. There we go. If you're wondering if we can change this colour, we can, because if we take this fill and we look at the core where we actually write into it, so take the render square property and we get rid of all this and we just do the dot fill equals, and now let's just go green. Now the first square is going to be green. And the second one is still going to be red. It's just the default colours. And there we have it. We have a button that's almost ready to, not perfect, but currently functions. And we have two elements that we can, or we have a way of drawing boxes or squares. I guess we can also change, you can obviously, this render property represents all this information in here, so if you wanted to change the size or the rotation, you could do it in the core. And it was 15, so that would be a bigger box. And that should be enough for today.